Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name again is Steve Shimoniak. This is a continuation of the critical thinking sessions. This is actually session 3 that deals specifically with being able to ask questions and use critical thinking to be able to ask questions. It's good that all 4 of you were in here on the last critical thinking session. And remember that the first critical thinking session actually talked about what critical thinking is. How we can actually take our thinking, because a lot of times we don't think well. We don't use some type of process to be able to think about our thinking. And we found out that by using Paul and Elder's elements of thought, i.e. purpose, information, you're looking at interpretation, you're looking at implications and consequences, points of view, and concepts and theories in order to, of course, make an informed decision. And that, again, is a portion of the college's critical thinking definition, is that we want you to make informed decisions. The second session, we talk about critical thinking standards. It's really great when we think, and we do a lot of thinking, but how do we actually think well? And in the second session, we talked about critical thinking standards. Just as well as there are intellectual elements, universal elements, that are able to break down our thinking into little pieces, there are also intellectual standards, ways that we can actually take these standards and be able to apply them to our thinking to make sure that we're able to do thinking well. And this is where we started talking about clarity. We talked about precision. We talked about relevance. We talked about depth. Again, and we will also talk about relevance and breadth. So we now have the elements. We now have the standards. Let's go into probably one of the major areas, because again, too, is our critical thinking is stimulated by one area, or I should say one concept, and that is the ability to be able to ask questions. And in this session, we're going to target on using critical thinking to be able to ask questions, ask better questions. But before we get into that, one thing real quick when we start taking a look at questions, and you know what, questions go back hundreds, thousands of years. Does anybody remember the old Greek philosophers, especially one called Socrates? Anybody remember him? Socrates actually was a teacher, a philosopher, but he wanted a way to be able to stimulate his students, to be able to gain more information from them, be able to stimulate their thinking. So he came up with a process called Socratic questioning. And Socratic questioning was the ability to be able to form a question and to be able to ask it in a way that the students had to actually think more than simply about, well, all I'm going to do is I'm going to explain what a definition is, or I'll explain a concept. He did it in such a manner that the students really had to go deep into their thinking, and at the same time to be able to have them ask questions as well. But unfortunately, this outstanding tool and the ability for us to be able to do this has basically almost become very little, if not anything, in our manner and the way that we do things today. And let me bring that point in that environment of why. Why don't we ask questions? Well, unfortunately, we built this environment of not asking questions. I think one of the cutest thesis statements that you'll see this on some websites. It's like, hey, when you were a newborn all the way up to 5 years, we taught you 2 things. You know what they were? Were there how to walk and how to talk. Right? Come here, come on, Mia. There you go. Mommy, not daddy, mommy. There we go. And then from ages 6 all the way up to age 18, we taught you 2 different things. They were sit down, shut up. All right? Parents, sit down, be quiet. Hey kids, sit down, shut up, be quiet. You get into kindergarten, sit down, be quiet, boys and girls. Middle school, sit down, shut up. High school, sit down, shut up, and be quiet. And then you get into college, or you get into areas of your life, and all of a sudden someone comes up to you and says, okay, take for instance here at the college. And if I was an instructor, and I went up to you and said, can you compare and contrast the economic system from Russia as it compares to the United States, and bring up several advantages and disadvantages, and why our economies impact on each one of our nations differently. And all of a sudden you simply get that. You know, it's a typical valley little Chihuahua dog in the back of the rearview mirror as you're driving up and down Harrison and Tyler. You ever see that? You're driving and you look in the rearview mirror and you see this little Chihuahua dog and the head's bobbing like this. And we never ask questions. Now, nice analogy, what does it mean? Well, we built this environment. We built this environment at home. We built it here at education. We've built it even at our jobs. Don't ask questions, just do what I tell you. So you're stymied, you don't want to ask any questions. Here in school, I'm up here and I'm delivering content, and what I tell you, be quiet, sit down, I will pour forth the knowledge and information. And then we do things that make us feel good by saying, are there any questions? And of course everyone's like, you can hear like a little cockroach in the back rubbing its legs. And then you walk out of the classroom and everyone is asking one another, hey, what did he talk about? What were the major topics? Oh, come on. You've seen that before. I'll be up here and I'll be talking as an instructor and I'll be telling you, all right, tomorrow you will do a paper on the fall and rise of the Roman Empire. You will make sure that's in MLA or APA format, 3 pages, 4 citations, and a partridge and a pear tree. And of course I will say, are there any questions? And of course everyone will look at me, stymied and just, glowing. And I thought that I put so much content. But what happens about 10 or 15 minutes after the class ends? You see that little congregation out the door saying, what was it that you wanted? Did you really understand that? So, our ability to ask questions is important because you're going to find out that, look, learning always continues as long as we ask questions. Why? It's because we get more information. Now remember in the first previous session, again too, when we're going into different elements of thought, I said questions at issue. And I said, okay, is there any questions? And of course it fell silent. Why is that? Why don't we ask questions in class? Or to our boss. It's really interesting. Everybody remember the Challenger? Challenger, accident back in, I think, 1986. I was actually in Florida when that happened. You know what? Some of the engineers and people that actually worked on there actually knew what the problem was, but NASA had built this environment that, hey, don't ask any questions, don't give us any, and there's just this air of element of not being able to tell people, hey, this was the problem, and asking questions. And lo and behold, we have astronauts that died.
Was it the shields that came?
Yes, it was the heat shields. No, it was the fuel rods. Remember the fuel rods? Yes.
It was coming in, going up.
No, it was going up and it exploded.
Which is the one that was coming in? There's 2 of them.
Yes, it was 2 of them. That one, gosh, for the life of me, I forgot.
Very close to.
Yes.
They were.
Yeah, but they were coming across and they were actually going down, and I think it was the heat shield. But what I'm trying to portray here is how many times do we get in the environment, even with our spouses, even when we're dealing with communication. I went and I bought this, and you wonder, were they ever asked questions? How many times do we really ask questions when we're looking at articles? Or when we're studying for a biology test? Or when we're studying for different content areas that we're trying to get our careers in? It's simply, unfortunately, we simply believe that by learning and by simply picking up the textbook and reading and rote memorying and scratching on the little highlighter all over the place, that we're effectively learning, we're asking ourselves questions, and we're not.